She was just a small orphan girl living alone in the pines. But what she did for a wounded stranger that night would bring 100 warriors to her cabin by morning and bind her fate to theirs forever.
Tell us where you're watching from. If these Western stories move you, share them. And subscribing helps us keep bringing new stories to life.
Her name was Weya, just turned 9. She lived alone in a sagging timber cabin on the north bend of Bitterroot Creek, too far for anyone to hear her if she screamed, too far for anyone to care. Her mother had died in the spring, fever took her fast, and Weya's father, well, he'd gone looking for gold in the high canyons and never come back. So she stayed, with the pine trees, the cold, and the silence. That evening, the sky was bruised with dusk, and Weya was out gathering dry wood when she heard it, a sound sharp enough to freeze her in her boots. Crying, not an animal, not a coyote, a child, faint and broken, like someone trying not to be heard. Weya dropped her bundle and crept toward the sound. Her heart beat faster with every step. The wind pushed through the black pines and the shadows stretched long. Then she saw her, a girl about her age, face half covered in mud, leg twisted beneath her, stuck at the edge of a shallow ravine. Her clothes were torn buckskin, soaked through and ripped at the sleeves. She was native, and she was hurt bad. Weya didn't speak at first. She just stared at the girl, and the girl stared back, wide eyes, face smudged with dirt, body shaking like a leaf in the wind. She was no older than Weya, maybe younger, but what caught Weya most was the look in her eyes, fear, the kind that don't come from falling, the kind that comes from running. Weya crouched low, one hand resting on a rock to steady herself. "You hurt?" she whispered. The girl didn't answer, only looked past her, toward the trees behind Weya. Weya turned, nothing there, just dark pines and cold air. But the silence was wrong, the kind of silence where even the birds knew not to sing. Weya moved fast. She broke a branch and splinted the girl's leg the way her mama used to. Slow, gentle, whispering every step. The girl never said a word, not even a wince, just gripped a stone in her little hand like she was ready to fight with it. Weya lifted her, barely strong enough to carry the weight, and staggered back through the trees toward the cabin. Behind them, the last light of day vanished, and the pines grew darker than sin. Weya's arms burned from carrying her. She pushed through the cabin door with her shoulder and laid the girl gently on a stack of old quilts by the hearth. The place was small, just a dirt floor, a cracked window, and shelves lined with dried roots and smoked rabbit. The girl still hadn't spoken. She just looked around with wide eyes, like she couldn't believe they were safe. Weya knelt beside her. "I'm Weya," she whispered. The girl didn't reply. Instead, she reached into the pouch on her belt and clutched something, tight. Weya leaned closer. "What's your name?" A pause. Then, so soft it was almost a breath, the girl answered. "Nolly." Weya smiled. "You're safe here, Nolly." But even as she said it, she wasn't so sure. She stood and bolted the cabin door, then checked the back window. That's when she saw it. Just for a second, at the edge of the trees, a shape, tall, still, watching, then gone. The back of Weya's neck prickled cold. She grabbed her father's old rifle off the hooks by the door. It was too big for her, but loaded. She turned back to Nolly and found the girl staring at her with something deeper than fear now, something that looked a lot like warning. As the night darkened, Weya warmed Nolly by the fire. She shared her ration of stew and cornbread, half for herself, half for the trembling child beside her. "Eat slow," Weya whispered softly. "Stay warm." Nolly ate with quiet gratitude. No words, just gentle nods and tear-filled eyes in the firelight. When the stew was gone and the cornbread crumbs scattered, they lay side by side on the quilt, exhaustion overtaking both. Weya offered a hand, and Nali took it, small fingers gripping hers, a promise of trust in the still night. The fire died down to embers. The cabin fell to silence, two girls sharing warmth in the face of an unforgiving wilderness. Morning came cold. Weya stirred first. The fire had burned low. Nali still lay asleep, her face softer now, no longer twisted in pain. For the first time in days, the cabin felt safe. Then came the sound, hoofbeats, hundreds of them, steady, rolling like thunder through the pines. Weya bolted upright. Her heart thumped. She grabbed the fire poker, stepped to the door and cracked it open, and froze. The valley below her cabin was filled with riders, Apache warriors, more than she could count, fanned out in a silent formation, horses snorting, faces carved with ash and paint. Their eyes were fixed on her cabin. She backed away slowly. "Nali," Weya whispered, "there's people out there." The girl sat up with a start, then limped to the door beside Weya. One look, and her face changed. She wasn't afraid. She opened the door and stepped outside. Weya followed, trembling. Then one man dismounted, tall, gray eyes, black hair braided with white feathers, his chest bare beneath a long buffalo robe, his voice carried like wind off stone. "Who cared for the child?" he asked in Apache. Nali answered quietly, her voice thin but steady. "She did." "The pale one," the warriors murmured. Some dismounted, others looked to the chief. He stepped forward, locking eyes with Weya. "You took her in?" he asked, this time in slow, accented English. Weya nodded once, gripping the poker tighter. She was crying, her leg was broke. I didn't want her to die out there." The chief stepped closer, towering over her now. He studied her face, and then Nali's. He knelt beside the girl. "Nali, do you know who you are?" She nodded faintly. "Daughter of Gray Eyes." The chief drew in a breath, and the valley grew silent. The valley held its breath. The chief, Gray Eyes, rose slowly, his hand resting on Nali's shoulder. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned to the others and spoke something low in Apache. A few warriors nodded, but the chief stepped past them, toward the cabin. He ducked low and entered. Weya stood frozen by the hearth, hands still blackened from cooking the night before. She'd never had a man like this inside her home, never seen such power in one person's silence. He looked around, noticed the small bowl of stew by the fire, the extra blanket draped over his daughter, the stitched-up wound, the dried blood on the floor. Then he looked at Weya. "You fed her." Weya nodded once. "You stayed with her." Another nod. He knelt down slowly, eye level now. His voice was deep but quiet. "She is my blood, my only child." Weya's hands trembled. "I didn't know," she whispered. "She was just hurt. I couldn't leave her." The chief nodded. Then he reached into a small pouch on his belt and removed a dark stone, smooth and oval, marked with white carvings. He placed it gently on the floor between them. "This means she lives because of you. From this day forward, if ever you are in danger, show them this." He rose without another word and left the cabin. Weya didn't move. She just stared at that stone, and for the first time since her mother died, she felt something rise in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. When Weya finally stepped outside, the world looked different. The pine trees were still there, tall and quiet. The creek still ran low through the rocks, just as it always had. But her cabin, it was surrounded by horses, men, bows and spears and painted faces. At least 100 Apache warriors had gathered, half of them mounted, the other half standing silent in the morning light. Some had feathers in their hair. Some wore deer hides or old Union belts. But not one of them looked away when she walked out. They'd come for the chief's daughter, but they were staring at her. Weya felt small, cold again. Until Nali appeared beside her, leaning on one leg, bandaged but standing. She slipped her hand into Weya's and softly said it, "Sister." Weya turned, startled. Nali smiled, weak but real. And then the warriors began moving, not toward the trail, but toward her cabin. 3 of them, elders with gray in their braids, approached carrying furs, dried meat, carved tools. One had a jug of thick black dye. They laid them gently at the foot of her porch. Gifts. "From the chief," one man said in broken English, "for saving the blood of our people." Then another stepped forward, a broad-shouldered man with a thick scar under his eye. He tied something to one of the porch beams, a braid of white horsehair. Weya didn't know what it meant, but Nali did. "That means protection," she whispered. "No man may harm you. No tribe may touch this place." And then the chief stepped forward. Not proud, not powerful, just tired. He looked at Weya like a father looking at something he'd lost long ago. Then he knelt, slow, like the weight of years was finally too much to bear. When he spoke, his voice was soft, not in English, but every word seemed to carry through the trees. Nali, barely able to sit up, whispered the words in Weya's ear. He says, he's sorry. He says the world is cruel to children, but that you were not cruel to his. He says you have honored their blood. The chief reached into a leather pouch and pulled out a carved stone pendant, the head of a wolf. He placed it in Weya's small palm, gently closing her fingers around it. Then, his voice trembled. Nali hesitated, then translated softer now. He says, he cannot leave you here. He says, please, come with us. He says the mountains will be safer, that you will never go hungry, that you will never be alone. The wind moved through the trees like it was listening too. Weya looked down at the pendant, then at Nali. She looked at the forest, the cabin, the woodpile still stacked from last night, then back to the chief. Her eyes didn't cry, but they held something deeper than tears. Weya stood still for a long time. The pendant felt warm in her hand, or maybe that was her own heartbeat finally slowing down. She looked one last time at her cabin, at the broken porch rail her father never fixed, the roof she patched alone after the spring rains, the bent pot still hanging on the doorframe. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Behind her the chief waited, quiet, still kneeling. Beside her, Nali took her hand, small fingers curling tight, like they never wanted to let go again. And slowly, Weya stepped forward, just once, then again, until she was standing right before the chief, and without a word, she nodded. The chief's eyes closed for a moment, like a prayer had been answered. He rose, then gave a signal. One by one, the Apache warriors turned their horses and began to move, not in retreat, but in welcome. And in the middle of them all, riding behind the chief, sharing a blanket with Nali, sat Weya, the girl who stayed behind, the girl who saved a stranger, the girl who that morning left her forest behind and became something more, family. But what Weya did not know, what none of them knew, was that they were being watched. From deep in the trees beyond the rise, a rifle lowered. A man spit chewing tobacco into the leaves and muttered, "A white girl riding with Apaches, that's gonna fetch us more than gold." He turned to the others behind him, 6 riders, mean faces. They kicked their horses and followed. But that, friend, is a story for another night. She never asked to be part of any of this. All she did was help a wounded girl when no one else would. But sometimes, one kind act is all it takes to change the course of 100 lives. And now, Weya, the girl who used to sleep alone beneath leaking shingles, rides beside warriors who'd give their lives to protect her. But peace, friend, it don't last long out here, not in the West. And if you listened real close, if you watched the trees that morning, you might have seen what Weya didn't. Men watching, tracking, waiting. Something's coming, and it ain't kindness.
If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. And if these Western tales mean something to you, subscribe now.